And we have become so calloused as a people and as a culture that we have, they're promoting this like everybody at the DNC gets a free iPad, you know? Except instead of an iPad, it's like, if you come to the DNC this year, we will kill your child for you. Wow. Starts the Democrat National Convention. It's going to be held in Chicago. There's already a lot of controversy stirring. There are Free Palestine protesters who are on the streets. People are pointing out on the right, they're pointing out that the DNC is erecting large fences all around the convention center where they will be meeting, which is kind of funny because it's like fences don't work, you know, walls don't work, but we're going to put up big walls to kind of keep the wrong people out of here. Already, Free Palestine protester broke into one of the welcome parties last night, took over the microphone. They're chanting some really crazy things. Again, you have this very interesting dichotomy of feminists, a huge flag, feminists and LGBTQIA plus people for Free Palestine. And it's just like, what episode of idiocracy are we living in right now? Like, well, I understand the idea of seemingly marginalized groups all banding together, but this is where you have some of these issues where you just cannot tie them together. It's like, let's say it's not just from the river to the sea. Let's say the whole world becomes Palestine. It's like, well, feminism is gone, right? LGBTQIA plus protections are gone, right? So it's so weird. I mean, it's such a meme at this point, but it's like, you know, it's like pigs for pro bacon. You know, it's like you are actively fighting for something that would actively destroy you if it had its way. And so you have these weird controversies. At the same time, you know, there's political ideas, there are foreign policy ideas. All of that stuff is very complicated, very intricate. A lot of it, we try to take a real nuanced view, and I think that's important. Every once in a while, though, something comes up that for me, as a Christian, as someone who is trying to, you know, submit my life to God and how he calls us to live and try to have his view of the world, there are some things where it's like, there's no nuance here. And I say that there's nuance maybe 3 layers down, but just at the top of it, it's like, I can't make this one okay. I can't explain this one away in any meaningful way. And I saw one of those yesterday. It really kind of took my breath away. Here's how the New York Post is reporting: free abortions and vasectomies, and an 18-foot tall inflatable IUD to be erected at the DNC in Chicago. So let's read a little bit more about this. Attendees at the DNC in Chicago will have the opportunity to get a free abortion or vasectomy just blocks away from the event. And vasectomy appointments are filling up fast. Planned Parenthood Great Rivers, which serves most of Missouri and part of southern Illinois, is sending a mobile health center to the Windy City's West Loop to offer reproductive services on Monday and Tuesday. Medication abortions are available on both days, with vasectomies only on Monday. Not only that, but here, if you're watching, is the giant 18-foot tall IUD, which is interesting to say the least. I'll be honest, I don't care near as much about that. I don't care near as much about the vasectomies. I know my Catholic brothers and sisters will care about that greatly as well. What I think they're doing is abortion and vasectomies. Like, all of this is just healthcare. You know, vasectomies are healthcare and it's part of family planning, you know, sure. Vasectomies take away your ability to produce life, and we can have a very nuanced conversation about that, okay? And people do, right? Throughout like all of Christendom, people have had that conversation. That's not the same thing as abortion. Abortion is not taking away your ability to create life. I mean, you also do that through celibacy. You also do that through a lot of means, right? Abortion is the taking of a life that's already been created. Those are massively different things. They're different categories. And you package them together in order to use this misleading, euphemistic language of healthcare. This is family healthcare. This is men and women's healthcare. It's not healthcare. It's the opposite of that. You're not leading to health. You're disrupting a natural process and you're ending a life. And so I don't have a way of making this something that it's just not. And you go to all the different levels, and I get really frustrated. And I talk a lot on here about, like, everyone has their political opinions. And typically the right side of the political aisle is seen as the Christian side, the evangelical side. The old joke was GOP, the grand old party, stood for God's only party, right? So those jokes aren't helpful. There are people who honestly just may not be very politically involved. They may not really understand the issues well. And they grew up, typically you end up voting the way your parents did. Their parents were Democrats. They become Democrats. They love the Lord. They've given their life to Jesus. They serve in their local church. I lead a church, Meta Church, that's very diverse along every line, including politically. And so you go in and you try to find nuance, and you have the conversations, and how do you best help people? And Republicans and Democrats have kind of held both sides of the tension of, the Republicans kind of more like, people need autonomy and we need to give them their liberty, and they got to be able to fail, and we got to let people fail so they'll learn their lesson. And the left seems a little bit more like, let's give as many handouts as we can, and let's have more social programs and more government, bigger government, and the right's like smaller government. All of that is just conversations to have, and it's part of a functioning society to have those debates and have those conversations. But then every once in a while, there is an issue like this. And when it comes to the issue of life, that is the guaranteed right of all people that guarantees all other rights. If you can't guarantee the right to life, you can't guarantee the right to liberty. You can't guarantee a pursuit of happiness. And we live in a country that started with the idea, a very uniquely Judeo-Christian idea, that we're endowed by our Creator, not by our government, not by any external entity, but by a transcendent entity, endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those are concentric rights. If you have life, then you can have liberty. If you have liberty, then you can pursue happiness. And when you have murder taking place, 60 million plus murders in the last 60 years, it's like, okay, I can go down a few layers to find nuance. And that's what I've done when I've preached on it. People who are pro-choice, in the best case scenario, are fighting for the rights of the liberty of women. And I think that's a worthy fight. And women have, throughout all the way back to ancient history, been oppressed in some significant ways. And so it's worth keeping an eye on that, fighting for it. On the pro-life side, they're fighting for the life of unborn babies. And so the question really comes down to, which one of those do we put in precedent over the other? The liberty of certain women or the life of unborn children? And the only thing that makes sense philosophically, theologically, methodologically, the only thing that makes sense is that life is the premier right. If we stop upholding the right to life, then we stop upholding rights altogether. And, in Deuteronomy, I believe God says to the Israelites, I have given you the choice, life or death, choose life. I mean, that is the call, and to prioritize life. And, we see it right away, like murder is the taking of an innocent life. That's just what it is. And it is the one idea that is strictly outlawed across like every possible religion. I mean, they all agree on that one thing because that's just written on our conscience. It's the law of God written on our hearts. And we have become so calloused as a people and as a culture that we have, they're promoting this like everybody at the DNC gets a free iPad, except instead of an iPad, it's like, if you come to the DNC this year, we will kill your child for you.
Wow.
That is so evil. And what makes it really hard, and it should make it difficult for believers, is the rights to abortion have become the leading cause on the left. And there's a lot of factors to that, but the economic policy has not worked well over the last several years. And there's nuance there, and you can agree and disagree with that. There are now wars breaking out, both in Ukraine and in Gaza. So that hasn't gone well on the foreign policy side. There's not a lot to run on. Kamala Harris has been the vice president, and they've been very clear throughout the administration that she's the last in the room, that they make decisions together. So she doesn't have a lot that she can point at a resume for the last 4 years and run on as a strong track record. So instead, they're going to go to this felt need and to a culture that has lost its way and rejected God. And it has become such a staple of what the left is running on that they are literally erecting 18-foot statues to these ideas, and they're offering free abortions for anyone attending. So this is what the ancient pagans would do. They would sacrifice their children as a part of the police, the political process of their city. They would offer their children to Molech. And the idea that that is an incentive for coming to your national convention, it puts you on the wrong side of history. I promise that. There's no way 100 years from now we don't look back on this the same way, with the same level of disgust that we look back on things like slavery, on things like the Holocaust, where we're like, we did what? We did what? The more science progresses, the more hardcore pro-choice people are having to admit, okay, so that is a human baby, but we still think we have the right to end its life, right? You're hearing a lot of those arguments now. Probably not most people on the pro-choice side that aren't as informed. They just hear women's rights, women's healthcare, women's reproductive rights. And it's like, you get the programming. 100 years from now, science is going to have progressed to the point where it's just very, very obvious what we're doing, and that we are like massively exterminating a huge number of our children. And in a world where we are trying desperately to have some equality among, racial issues, someone's going to wake up someday and realize not only are we killing 1 million babies a year, but they are disproportionately minority children. So what are we doing? And how is this the platform for one of the parties, the differentiating factor? And it might work. I mean, Kamala really might win this election primarily off voters whose top concern is abortion. And man, Jesus, come back.
Wow.
Like it's time, this is where we're at. And I've said this so many times, but I'll say it again. Time as far as patterns doesn't typically move linearly. It moves cyclically. And one of the patterns that we're experiencing right now is it's like pagan, and then it's pre-Christian, where the Christians show up and they're persecuted severely. And then they win because, God always wins. And then it becomes Christian. And then their affluence leads them back, just like the Israelites. They were in this loop all through the Old Testament. And then we start looking at the shiny objects of the pagan world. And then we become post-Christian, and then pre-pagan, and then back to pagan. And we only realize the season we're living in once we're living in the next. So the whole time we've been saying that we're a post-Christian nation, we've actually been a pre-pagan nation. And the whole time we were saying we were a Christian nation, we were actually a post-Christian nation, right? So we're like somewhere in between pre-pagan. And with things like this, we're just quickly moving back all the way pagan. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed so you can stay up to date with all new content. And if you want early access, exclusive content, and monthly live Q&As, make sure to check out patreon.com/ClaytonTyner.